The Lord showed me a large crowd. It was countless. I couldn't see where the end was. I saw pastors, missionary. I saw all the evangelical and non-evangelical. I saw important great men of the world, the rich millionaires. I saw great ones there. When Jesus opened that vision and showed me, I looked just a second and I no longer saw Jesus by my side. The angel appeared by my side again and he told me this: Jesus is coming back now. When he said Jesus is coming back now before he completes his sentence, I saw my whole family there gathered in that crowds, and I remember when Jesus told me they are not going up in the rapture. At that moment when I was before my family in the crowds, I heard thunder so loud, so strong, a voice so powerful like the voice of thunder. The whole earth was shaken. I knew that the strong voice was heard by everyone gathered there in the multitude. At that time when that voice sounded, whole earth shook. I saw these great men of the earth lying on the ground and they cried out and screamed. I asked Jesus for mercy, but I heard that voice saying they have built their kingdoms here on earth. Their God was money, and I saw these great men of the earth with their faces prostrated and they were crying and screaming as the thunderous voice sounded, and I saw people being raptured all over the world. They were transformed and were shining stars when the thunderous voice resounded. People rose in the speed of a star to the sky. I looked and saw them going up towards the sky and praising the Lord as they were leaving planet Earth. They sang Goodbye Planet Earth. They were abounding with great joy and happiness as they praised and sang to the Lamb. I was crying because I wasn't climbing with them. I started screaming to Jesus for mercy. I said, Lord, I want to stay, please Jesus, don't leave me here in this world. My daughter contemplated those singing in the heights and praising God. At that time I started to feel like my body was floating. It was like I was leaving the earth and heading towards heaven, holding the hand of my 7-year-old daughter Camille. I started climbing with her, but when I started climbing with her, as I looked down I saw the despair of those who had stayed, and Jesus allowed me to hear their thoughts. Some of them shouted and said, Yes, how long Jesus I served you? I am 50 years old, Jesus I have served you all my life. Others said, Jesus, I left everything to serve you. I don't want to stay. There were great despair. The greatest pain I felt was when I looked and saw my family and I started crying a lot, and I asked Jesus if he can do something. It was too late. There was nothing else I could do. I saw some people climbing and jump upside down. They jumped from building but they didn't die and nothing happened. There wasn't even a scratch on their body, and I saw them in desperation as they tore their clothes and tore out their hair. They curled up on the floor. Others screamed. It was very great affliction. I saw pastors who were left with his herd and screamed they desperately. People asked Jesus for mercy but there was no longer mercy. It seems he was no longer moved. Those screams, those tears and despair no longer touched the heart of Jesus. Jesus was like it didn't matter anymore. And I was left desperate, for when we were in the heights heading upwards I looked down and I saw a great abyss. Brethren, I'm not talking about something simple, I'm talking about something dark, frightening and tremendous darkness. I'm not talking about the darkness of the night. No one is afraid of the darkness of the night. We walk through it alone. I'm talking about a tenebrous darkness, a very great abyss. It was a very horrible place, so bad that my soul was terrified. I looked at it and I knew that those who had stayed were gonna suffer. It is written, the fifth angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss. When he opened the abyss, smoke rose from it like the smoke from a gigantic furnace. The sun and sky were darkened by the smoke from the abyss. When I was going up, my daughter's hands were slipping. I was holding her fingertips. Since I couldn't save my family, I implored the Lord to save my daughter from falling into this great abyss. When Jesus said I can't do anything for her, I started to scream. I knew that those who were there inside the great abyss suffer tremendously. The abyss had eyes and claws waiting for the order of Jesus to take us to hell, because there are demons there. I started to look at their eyes and their claws and I became desperate. I became afraid because below us was a great abyss around. I cried out because I felt like the abyss was not static but it was like rising and following us. For each time I climbed higher and that darkness of the abyss below seems to rise as well. I thought about those who had stayed and I now knew how much they were suffering. After a little while I started to feel like I was going up very quickly until I arrived at a place and saw a little door so tiny, so narrow, all crystal, all silver. It's very beautiful. I started looking and I realized that it was the door to heaven. It's not big, for it was small and narrow. I looked at that glow, that glory that came from there illuminated where I was because I was in darkness, and it became light. I held my daughter in my hands and I looked to heaven gate and to the abyss on the side. Brethren, there was a bridge. This bridge is not big, for it's very narrow, heaven and hell side by side. There's one behind the other, because it is so narrow. To enter heaven you have to go over the abyss. That's where I realize that at the gate of heaven, there is also an abyss where you can fall down to hell. At that moment I looked and saw a tiny child, about 2 years old age, and I saw that child. He was climbing over that bridge and I was scared for him to fall down into the abyss, but he didn't fall. He went walking, and when he arrived at the gate of heaven his robes were all turned into brightening white, a beautiful robe so white and perfect it's something I can't describe the brightness of that garment, and he was not barred from the gate of heaven, for he entered the glory. And I was in a hurry to get there too because my daughter was about to slip of my hands. The second person I saw was a sister. She was on top of that narrow staircase. She was in danger of falling in the abyss. When she tried to reach my daughter's hand I no longer saw her. Then I saw Jesus himself in front of me. It wasn't like seeing Jesus before ascending into the rapture, for he was different. I knew that this was the end point. It was all or nothing, where decision will made. In my thought I said, Lord, if you allow me to come back to earth, I'm going to do everything differently. I'm going to change my clothes and the things I wear. I still was thinking about my children. I knew I wasn't worthy of going in the kingdom of heaven because our conscience accuses us before him, and there is no mother, there is no father, there is no one there to defend us. When I stood before Jesus at the gate of heaven, it was like standing in front of a judge to receive my sentence. I would only be charged or not. And whatever the verdict, I reap what I saw. I wanted to run and hug Jesus when I looked into that abyss. It was very bad and scary, and my soul didn't want to go there. I looked at the Lord wanting to hold on to him, but my sin was separating me from him. From heaven's door you already see heaven and contemplated the glory, and I said how good and beautiful it is. You know, it was a place of peace, a place of love where I would no longer feel pain, where I was going to live happily forever, and my soul would be in happiness there in that place. But when I looked down I knew there was a tribulation. People were suffering and they screamed a lot, and I felt like I only saw darkness in that great abyss, but I knew there were people in their suffering. Finally Jesus looked at me and said, Daughter, you cannot enter. I was blocked by Jesus at the gate of heaven. How sad it is to be blocked by Jesus at the gate of heaven. Jesus looked at me and said, My daughter, if you don't stop cutting your hair, if you don't stop using makeup, if you don't stop wearing a blouse of spaghetti straps, if you don't stop painting your nails, you won't enter. When Jesus said you will not enter, I despaired because he spoke to me in a very strong and loud voice of authority, and I was now waiting for a word from Jesus to spare me from the abyss of darkness that was around me. It kept getting closer with its eyes and claws, waiting for an order from Jesus in order to take me to hell, but it couldn't do it because Jesus hadn't given the order, and I couldn't enter heaven either because Jesus hadn't allowed it. And at that moment I began to shout and I said to Jesus, For you I leave everything, I give up everything, I abandon everything for you. I want heaven. How good it is to be in heaven. I don't want to go to hell. It is bad, don't let me go there. I want to stay here. Heaven is good. It was about half an hour for Jesus to give me an answer as to whether I should enter or go to hell. It wasn't half an hour of suffering, it was half an hour of despair. I screamed and cried because when we are sick we know that we will take medicine and that illness will go away, but then I knew there was no other way. It was for the whole eternity. If it was for me to go to heaven, it will be for all eternity. I would stay there in that beautiful place of peace. But I also knew if Jesus told me to go to hell, it would be for all eternity. I would spend my eternity without him. At that moment I started screaming and asking Jesus not to let me go to hell, that he would give me a chance so that I could enter heaven. But in my mind I said, if you allow me to return to earth, I will do everything differently because I knew everyone was in makeup. I knew where my lipsticks were. I knew where my blouse with straps were. It's like the Lord shows you your life in a big screen in front of you. You are not innocent because your conscience accuses you, and also Jesus makes you see your sin. It passes before you. I was crying a lot in despair. Then Jesus came to the right side and he stretched out his hands and he gave me permission to enter heaven.